Hey there, my name is Karl Davis, and I'm here to talk to you a little bit about making smart architectural decisions, trying to manage the risk that they can present. As an industry, I don't think we really talk about this a whole lot because it probably feels a little too personal or too fuzzy. There aren't any concrete things you can take across projects. So let's kick it off with a concrete example of an architectural choice I made that went rather poorly. There's lots of those to choose from, but this is just a nice, simple, and silly example for the talk. Anybody here ever use WordPress? Yeah, me too, or at least I used to. It's a great tool, right? But it turns out for my particular needs on this particular thing, it was a poor choice. Why? Well, if we dive into that a little bit, I think we can pull out some lessons that we can apply across all sorts of other, more complex projects. So what were the mistakes I made here with this particular decision to use WordPress? Number one, I paid attention to features that I didn't need. WordPress is great, right? It's got a GUI, it's got collaboration tools, it's got, I think, built-in version control, a WYSIWYG editor. You can have comments on all your pages really easily. I didn't need any of those features, and all of them caused problems down the road for me. Number two, I didn't really have any easy way to automate my workflow with WordPress. At least at the time, it wasn't super automatable. You had to log into a browser and you had to click a lot of buttons manually every time you wanted to do anything. And for updates, it was even worse. There really wasn't any way to install updates automatically in the deployment scenario I had. And so I mostly just didn't. And every time I thought about that box sitting out all lonely and unpatched on the internet, I got really sad. Okay, number three, thing that went poorly with this. It was outside of my comfort zone, my technical core competencies, for no good reason. So I've got solid HTML and CSS and whatever skills, but I'm not really a PHP guy. Nothing against it. It's just not in my core competency. And so every time I had to dive into WordPress's code to tweak a theme or to try and get it to install a patch cleanly, it just took longer than it should have, and that hurt. So the end result here was I had a site that didn't really get updated very often and was a giant security risk to boot. It was a bad and kind of weird combo of both under-engineering and over-engineering at the same time. So, what's the right way? What's a better way? Well, here are some suggestions. Number one, play to your team's strengths. If you've got a bunch of Java folks, deploy things that are built on Java. If you need to build something and you've got a bunch of Rails folks, build it in Rails. Don't pick new frameworks or tools unless you really need to. Number two, keep things automated or at least automatable. So you ought to be able to install, configure, update, and hopefully even use your tools and your applications in an automated way. If you aren't automating it, I think everybody here knows that to some extent it's going to be broken because it's not in source control and nobody really knows what state it's in. Number three, and this is kind of like a cheat code for this architectural kind of stuff, write down your decisions. Nobody here likes pointless documentation, but there is something about just writing down your decisions and justifying them to yourself on paper that leads to better decisions. Furthermore, push it through your source code review pipeline and let the entire team share ownership in those decisions and help you make better ones. Number four, and this is kind of the overarching theme of the talk, is to play it safe unless you really need to do otherwise. So your team, your organization, your project only gets so many innovation points to spend on things. So spend them on things that matter, things that are competitive differentiators for your company that deliver real value to your end users, not just things that, avoid resume-driven development, basically. So for everything else, make nice and boring decisions that aren't going to wake anybody up in the middle of the night with a page. Probably the best way to play it safe like that, and this kind of throws back to the title of my talk, right? Elegant weapons for a more civilized age, is to reach for classic approaches, things that are so widespread and omnipresent and solid that nobody talks about them anymore, right? They're just solid, rock-solid tools. So some examples. Bash, right? If you need to glue two things together and you can do it in a couple hundred lines of well-commented Bash or less, use Bash. It's a great skill set to have and a great shared tool. Do you need some library or utility code? 9 times out of 10, you should be using your OS's or your language's standard libraries for that. Nothing against, external third-party libraries. There are great ones out there. But every time you choose one, you're adding unnecessary complexity to your projects. Another example is, databases. So if you need to shove data into something, and unless you have a real reason not to, just stick with a relational database. Everybody more or less knows SQL, and they scale way better than you think they do. So all of those things might be boring, but in the end, boring is just another way of saying elegant and reliable. Boring is beautiful. So again, my name is Karl Davis, and if you have any questions or you want to chat about this some more, I love talking about architecture and making smart decisions, so hit me up.